It's recording. John's birthday gold foil.
I don't know how to open it from here.
Yes.
Oh.
That's perfect.
Thank you so much for playing our game.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it could be better. What's up, Renegades? I am Lupine Fiasco, and while I may have a new webcam and I may have a new mic, I am bringing you the same daily Fi gameplay that you know and love. This video, however, is a tournament report for ProQuest Season 4, Week 1. For anyone new to the channel, welcome. What we usually do here is review replays of games I've played on Talishar.net days or weeks ago. Today, though, I'm going to debrief on my first event of the ProQuest Season 4 season. I will tell you all about my games, including what I think went right or went wrong, and give my impression of the event overall. I brought harmonized Kodachis to my event. I said I would, I followed through, and I intend to give you all the hot goss. But if you would like to review that deck list or try it for yourself, you can find it in the video description below. While you're down there, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Subscribing is the best free way to support me, and make sure you see daily Fi gameplay in your video feed 5 days a week. Prep for my ProQuest involved just putting a real goodie bag together. I brought snacks, I brought tuna salad, I brought water, all the things that are going to keep me sharp throughout the event. The benefit of playing an aggressive deck like Fi, as you all know if you watched my video last week, is that we have short games. Even the Mask of Momentum grind fests are, 20 minutes, 30 minutes max? And when we have Dromai mirrors, Bravo mirrors, lasting the entire 55 minutes, that gives us plenty of time to refill our stomach and empty our bladder. So I had friends at the event who told me how hungry they were, who told me how tired they were or thirsty, and my philosophy going into an event like this is if I lose, it is going to be because I misplayed or was outplayed. It will not be because of anything I could prevent, such as hunger or thirst. I also brought my deck box with my deck included and no other cards. This is a mistake that a friend of mine made. At big events like this, you get promos, you open packs, you trade cards, and you stick them in your deck box because why wouldn't you? If you are deck checked and you have random cards strewn throughout your deck box, that is an IP2. It could potentially lose you a game. So, deck box is empty, except for my deck, except for dice, tokens. I had a paper copy of my deck list, though as I was told at the event, phones were okay for sideboarding ahead of the game, so I didn't end up using it. You can see my deck list as well. I print them out ahead of time. It isn't something that I want to bother with at the event. I just want to hang out with friends ahead of time, maybe talk a little trash, and get ready to play. This event happened October 21st in Northern California at Final Cut TCG. That is my neighborhood game shop. The staff there is great. The owner is great. He has one employee that I'm very friendly with. Coleman is just a fantastic guy, always very supportive, always very friendly to me. He's just really fun to see when I head down to Final Cut. And Final Cut is really good about prize support, really good about supporting the players. We have a few game stores in the Northern California area where I live. It is great just to get to play Flesh and Blood in paper multiple times a week, but Final Cut just goes above and beyond for player support. So once I found out that they were going to have another ProQuest this season, I was down, signed up as soon as I could, made a plan to go and play, reprioritize everything else. October 21st does happen to be my birthday, so Family, no. Friends, no. You can wait until Sunday the 22nd because October 21st is when I'm playing Flesh and Blood. This is the meta breakdown of the event. As you can see, a pretty good distribution of heroes. Lexi and Bravo being the most represented. OG Phi, Katu Max being the least represented, with a handful of heroes strewn in between. You can see the top 8 conversions here. Spoilers, I did make top 8. Phi and Max having 100% conversion rates, clearly the top dogs of this meta. With Lexi having a surprisingly low conversion rate. Now, the one Lexi that did make top 8 was the only undefeated hero in Swiss with a 5-0 record. But we see good conversion from Bravo as well, and Icelander having the second highest conversion after Phi and Max. Let's talk about the games I played. Starting in Swiss, my round 1 opponent was Dromai. This was a win for me in a couple of different ways. First, I won the die roll, so I did choose to go first. Dromai is one of the only matchups where I want to be going first. Phi is an aggressive hero. We like to take tempo, and being on the play is a great way to do so. So we get to block with as much of our opening hand as we need to, then throw the first real attack back at our opponent. It's a great way to take an early lead, either on life totals or hand size. But with Dromai, and especially with Royal Dromai that uses the new tome and Crown of Dominion, she just has too many ways to utilize an all-red hand on turn 1 to set herself up for success over the course of the game, whether it be pitching to gold, pitching to Seeker's Equipment, pitching to Time Skippers, or God forbid she even draw Tome of the Imperial Flame on turn 1. So I want to be going first here. I'm not trying to leak damage necessarily, that isn't the point. If I can leak damage, that's great, and Phi can certainly draw hands that go over the top of Dromai's defenses, even if she's blocking out completely. But the real goal here is to set a card in Arsenal and make sure that Dromai cannot refill her hand after pitching to a Time Skippers or gold. If she pitches to gold on turn 2, then she is down a card. If she pitches to Time Skippers, then she's down 3 cards. And maybe she's making Ash, but she doesn't get to throw much damage back at me or do much in the way of playing multiple dragons. So I really like to go first against Dromai. And we see it pay off here, where Dromai was not particularly ahead on Ash at any point in this game. Overall, it was a typical Dromai game. I was not under any pressure at any particular point in the game. I had decent Art of War turns, got a few Mask of Momentum triggers over the course of the game, and took it down fairly easily. I will say about Kodachi Phi, he is very good against Dromai, better than Emberblade, I would say. You have surgical precision to kill off dragons, be they Ashwings, which die to a single Kodachi attack, Chromai or Kyloria, which die to 2, Asvali, which dies to a head jab. Asvali also dies to Kodachi Phoenix Flame. Overall, you just have much more flexibility in how you kill the dragons, and in particular, 3 health dragons are easy targets for Mask of Momentum triggers. Emberblade Phi might find himself having to split too much damage or be relying on too many attacks to hit to reliably trigger Mask of Momentum every turn. And while he may push more damage on an average turn cycle, Kodachi Phi has the advantage of drawing multiple times from Mask of Momentum triggers that offset the damage from Emberblade and in many cases exceeds it. So, just to summarize, round 1 was against a Dromai. It was a clean win for us, and we move on to round 2. Round 2 saw us paired against Azalea. Traditionally a hard matchup for Fi, but a few things went our way here that got us the win. First, while we did lose the die roll, our opponent chose to go first. Typically, I would say Azalea wants to go second in this matchup, as does Fi. While Azalea does not play the go wide style that Fi or Lexi do, she does want to present a lot of damage. She is trying to present on hits, and while it is probably simplistic, I would call her an aggro deck. As in any aggro mirror, you do want to go second. So Azalea going first here presents the possibility of a high roll. She has 9 cards in her deck that I would say really do present too much pressure on turn 1, which are Red in the Ledger, Knock the Death Whistle, which finds Red in the Ledger, or Remorseless. Any of these, particularly with a dominate effect, can really set the tone of the game and take away our turn 2. Now, I didn't see any of this from Azalea, so I was able to block out the entire attack on turn 1, then take tempo on turn 2. My first turn of the game saw a 15 damage turn, ending with a snatch that drew an Art of War for the arsenal. And while this was a lot of damage, it did take my Snapdragon Scalers, and I do think that I got a little happy to use them. I should not have used them so soon. My Azalea plan is to board out Kodachis, board in Emberblade, and Mask the Pouncing Lynx, and look to set up a double finisher turn, but without the Snapdragon Scalers. I don't have that possibility. If I draw a finisher in my hand, particularly on an Art of War turn, then I don't have the ability to give it go again and break Pouncing Lynx to find a second finisher, which means I'm probably using Pouncing Lynx to find a double strike. And if not a double strike, a yellow brand. Snapdragons being gone really takes away a lot of the power of Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. And so while I was able to stick a 15 damage turn and put an Art of War in Arsenal, I do think it was a mistake. It was not a mistake I was punished for. Azalea did get to throw some damage back at me with a Bloodrot Pox and Seek and Destroy trigger, but I drew into the blue. I had the Art of War available, so I was able to present a 21 damage turn without being punished by Seek and Destroy. My Azalea and I talked about that turn after the game, as she did have a Tar Pit Trap available. My first attack that turn was a brand with Cinderclaw that once it hit, I broke Pouncing Lynx to find Lava Burst. I did not have any finishers in hand after playing the Art of War and drawing up, so it really was an ideal situation for me not having Snapdragon Scalers, and my Azalea opponent did not expect me to break Pouncing Lynx on the first attack, so he still had the Tar Pit Trap available to play later on in the turn, which prevented some damage, but Lava Burst still came in for 7 damage at the end of that turn, just pushing too much over the top of Azalea's blocks. The crackback was not particularly strong, and my follow-up turn was a 17 damage Salt the Wound turn, which was just way too much for Azalea to overcome. My opponent followed up with back-to-back Red in the Ledger, but at that point I was just too far ahead. Both Red in the Ledger turns, I was still able to present 4 damage, which represented, if not lethal, a significant amount of Azalea's remaining health. Once the Red in the Ledgers ran out, I had a 4-card hand to just get the last bit of damage. So we pick up the win against Azalea and move on to round 3. Round 3 saw us paired against Prism. And a 2-0 Prism is already scary. Now, this is a Prism player that I am familiar with. He is a local of mine. I have played him a number of times, and I know that he is built for Heralds. He is not bringing auras. So while I would expect a random prism on Talishar to bring in Luminaris and throw heralds at me, I am not expecting the deck to be geared towards that. It's more of a last-ditch effort to not immediately be dead to aggro. But this prism I knew was going to be built for heralds. I had already scouted out that he had blue pummels in his deck, so this was not going to be as easy as I would normally expect it to be against a random prism on Talishar, and we saw this bear out over the course of the game, where I managed to pick up the win, but had 1 point of life remaining at the end of the game. One thing that I would change about this game, if I could, is that I brought Flamescale Furnace in, thinking that I would need the 2 extra health to deal with the Herald's Onslaught. I believe this is wrong. I think Tunic would have been the correct play. The reason I think that is while Heralds have good on-hits, be it damage, spectral shield creation, or even just triggering Prism, none of them are disruptive. I don't care about blocking any of these, and Flamescale Furnace really was just 3 life over the course of the game. It didn't block any on-hits, it didn't prevent any disruption, it was just life. And the game went long enough that Tunic would have had at least 2 activations and maybe a third. And I think the 2 or 3 additional resources is better and more impactful than 2 additional points of life. So that is something to note if you have a local prism in your scene, if you know that your prism is on Heralds. I will be bringing Tunic into all of my Prism games until such a point that I find Furnace would have been better if I knew that I would be playing against Heralds. As it was, I did make a mistake on turn 1, blocking my opponent's initial Herald. I blocked for exact damage. I was punished by a pummel. Now it was turn 1. I was going second, so I do get to draw up. The pummel is not so disruptive, but I could have afforded to overblock the Herald attack. I knew the pummel was in the deck because I had seen it already in a different game, so it just put me off to a weird start where now Prism has a Figment. The Figment created a Ponder, so despite playing out 4 cards, Prism still did get to set up a 5-card hand for the next turn. But who's to say how the game would have gone? It baited the pummel on turn 0, where pummel is at its worst and least disruptive. I was never hit with another pummel over the course of the game. So who's to say that a pummel on turn 2 would not have been more devastating? It's the sort of thing that I can think back and say, well, it would have been smart to overblock. But I can't say how much it affected the game, if it still would have even had the same outcome. I will say, despite Prism starting the game with 32 health, this Prism had 48 health by the end of the game, because she hit with 4 Heralds, found 4 Figments, and each of those Figments transformed into an Angel. So even with Emberblade and Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, which I do board in against Prism, I am not expecting that Mask of Momentum will ever trigger, even if I can go 6 links wide. Despite bringing in the zoomy, boosty Emberblade Mopple package, this was a long game. I made a mistake at one point, which Prism capitalized on and which was very cool, which is I drew into a crummy hand. It had Art of War, it had a blue, but it had no starter, and I didn't have my Snapdragons available, so I wasn't super excited about rolling the dice and trying to fish for something draconic. So I chose to give my next attack Go Again and draw 2 cards. The attack that I was going to give Go Again to is a Snatch, and my Prism had an Angel on the board. So I thought, how smart am I? I'll attack the Angel, draw a card from the Snatch effect, And between the 3 cards that I've drawn, one of them surely is a Draconic starter. So I attack the Angel with Snatch. The Snatch has Go again. Prism activates her Halo of Illumination, banishes a Herald from hand. To draw a card from the Halo and find a Figment of Triumph. Figment of Triumph gives all incoming attacks -1 power. So the Snatch did not kill the Angel, and I had to throw another attack at it to kill it. The attack I threw was a yellow brand with Cinderclaw, so it wasn't like I had to devote way too much damage to killing this Angel, but that's 2 damage that didn't go at Prism's face. It felt so bad to have to throw more damage at this dang Angel. I did win the game. It all worked out, but it was very, very tight, and it makes me think that Herald Prism may be something that Fi needs to worry about. Now, the same Prism did get bodied by a Bravo in the next round and lost by 35 points, so maybe Heralds isn't something we are going to see much of at the top tables, but for Fi, who doesn't block and who doesn't want to block, it can be bad. It can be very, very dangerous. But Prism is done. We move on to round 4. Round 4 saw our first game against Lexi. We did take a loss on this one, and this Lexi did proceed to go undefeated in Swiss. The first bad thing to happen over the course of this game is losing the die roll. We were put on the play, so Lexi had the opportunity to block out our first attack. And despite this, our turn 1 was very good. We leaked 2 damage with Kodachis, got blocks from Lexi such that she only had 1 card in hand and was not able to activate Voltaire to set up a 5-card hand on her turn. And we also ended our chain with Snatch, which Lexi chose to take. She had a 3 of kind in hand, which I found out later. So she ends up taking 6 damage on turn 1. We get to play out our entire hand and get a 5-card hand on our next turn. So while this should have been very impactful, and it was, Lexi did follow that up with another 3 of a kind to take tempo back. The second bad thing that happened to us is a Ravenous Rabble revealed an Art of War instead of a red. We really needed that Ravenous to come in for 4, not 3, as Lexi did not have her Hornet Sting available to prevent the Mask of Momentum trigger. If we had been able to hit for 4, either Lexi gives us 2 cards on blocks, which we then follow up with a Command and Conquer, or Lexi takes the damage, we play our Command and Conquer, and we get to set a card in Arsenal. So that was unfortunate. It is the nature of Ravenous Rabble. It is also why I hate playing Ravenous Rabble. But it is what it is. At one other point in the game, we had an all-red hand, and if any one of the cards in that hand had been blue, we would have had an incredible turn that easily wins us the game. Finally, our opponent puts us low enough that they can attack with a Bolton shot for 5 with Go again. We are at 6, and I have only seen 1 copy of Rain Razors. So I block the Bolton shot, playing around the Rain Razors. The Rain Razors didn't exist. And had we not blocked that Bolton shot, we would have gone to 1. We would have still had our Mask of Momentum available to block with, and we would have been able to prevent lethal on a later attack, which would have let us keep another card in hand to present more pressure to Lexi, which would have ultimately resulted in a win. I talked to my buddy Coleman after the game about that decision to block the Rain Razors, about that decision to play around the Rain Razors. His opinion, which I think was really neat, is that since I am in the 3-0 bracket and I know that there are only 5 rounds of this event, 3-2 that loses in the last 2 rounds theoretically is locked for top 8. So his opinion is that since I am in theory locked for top 8, take the risky play, because it can only pay off. If I play safe and lose, well, I'm still locked for top 8, so if I play risky and win, well, now I'm an even higher seed. And I thought that was a really interesting take, and it's something I am going to remember going forward. It would have paid off in that game, but nevertheless, we find ourselves in the 3-1 bracket, moving into round 5. Round 5 has us paired against another buddy of mine playing Icelander. My friend is also 3-1, but has lost earlier in the event. I believe he picked up his loss in round 3. So he asks that I concede to him so that, in theory, we both make top 8. He didn't need to ask. I did lose the game, but conceding there just felt a little too risky for me. 3-2, having lost in the last 2 rounds, is in theory a lock, but in practice, someone has to bubble out, and I wanted to make sure that wasn't me. Despite the loss, it was a very good game. We start by losing the die roll and being put on the play. There is a year and a half of rhetoric at this point which says that either Icelander or Fi wants to go first in this matchup. Fi wants to have an undisrupted attack that sets a card in Arsenal. Icelander wants to set a card in Arsenal to inhibit Fi's first turn while also getting the first Tunic activation. But as my buddy and I have decided, either of us really want to go second in this matchup. Icelander is going to throw Disruption, or she is going to throw a big attack. She's going to either Ice Feign or she's going to Wounded Bull. And in either one of those cases, Fi really wants to be able to draw up after. Fi wants to discard to the Ice Feign effect, then draw back up, or block out the Wounded Bull, then draw back up. And if he goes first, he doesn't get to do that. On the flip side, Icelander really wants to block out Fi's first attack, then be able to present Disruption that Fi does not get to draw back from. So losing the die roll here is definitely to our disadvantage, and that did play out over the course of the game. That said, it was a very good game. I think I played it very well. I felt behind over the course of the early and mid game, but never to the point that I was in danger. And despite playing through multiple Channel Lake Frigids, a Blizzard or two, and some well-timed Ice Feigns, I did find myself with an Art of War in Arsenal, a Tunic activation available, and an Energy Potion on the board. The problem is that the Art of War turn was just bad. I had a 3-card hand with the Art of War in Arsenal. I start with a Ravenous Rabble. Ravenous Rabble reveals E-Strike off the top of the deck. I pitch my blue, play Art of War, banish the E-Strike from my hand, and draw into E-Strike Command and Conquer. Ravenous Rabble hits for 5. I followed with Command and Conquer for 7. Icelander did have a red either Ice Feign in Arsenal, so she did need to block the Command and Conquer with 2 cards from hand and equipment, but was able to Ice Feign on the crackback and take tempo back. Had that Art of War turn been better, been a typical Art of War turn, maybe deal 20 plus damage, I think that would have been an easy win. As it was, I could see it having been a mistake to fire off the Art of War when I know that I'm going to draw an E-Strike, but I felt like I had to make something happen that turn, and I wasn't able to do so. So we do pick up a loss. We are 3-2 going into the cut to top 8, and we wind up the 8th seed. So while we did luck into it, we did not bubble out of top 8. I do feel good about scrapping for that position, because another 3-2 bubbled out and hit 9th place, and that easily could have been us. So I felt good about fighting for it, but we do find ourselves in 8th seed, playing against the same Lexi that we lost to, who, being undefeated, is the 1st seed. Heading into round 6 of the day, we are up against our same Lexi from before, and because we are the lower seed, there isn't even a die roll. We just get told that we are going first. Despite being forced to go first, despite having a worse turn one than we had in our last game, we do end up picking up a win here. We found great disruption over the course of the game. I believe I saw and played every breaking point in the deck. I believe I saw and played both Command and Conquers. I was able to play a Warmonger's Diplomacy that did end up preventing what I assume was quite a bit of damage. We never saw an enemy 3 of a kind. And while we did perhaps play too aggressively, there were a few turns where I didn't block, and I think in hindsight that I should have. We were able to keep Lexi off of her front foot long enough to set up a very strong Art of War turn. The player and I talked after the game and came to the decision that he just wasn't very versed in the Phi matchup. There was one turn in particular where I had a 3-card hand. The hand was a blue, a Ravenous Rabble, and a Breaking Point. And the attack looked like Kodachi, Ravenous Rabble, Breaking Point. Ravenous Rabble thankfully flipped a red, and Lexi responded to it by blocking with Tar Pit Trap. So we don't get the Mask of Momentum trigger, and Mask of Momentum is actually burned here because the effect attempted to happen and was blocked, so it cannot happen again. But we did trip the Tar Pit Trap, and that's what needed to happen because now Breaking Point on hit is available again. It's happening. And that took Lexi off of what would have been a very good turn. Now, instead of having 6 cards in hand, just having 3. And Lexi and I talked about that, and he had said that if he was more familiar with the matchup, he might have realized that, well, the card on top of the deck was a double strike. I don't care if you draw a double strike. I care that you have 1 floating resource, 1 card in hand, and then one of the best cards in your deck is Breaking Point, which really just screws up my whole turn. I do sympathize with that. I think that is correct, that if the Tar Pit Trap had been played on the Breaking Point, we'd probably lose that game, but one of the advantages of being a specialist in Flesh and Blood, and particularly in being a specialist in a deck that is not at the top of the meta, is that I've played the Lexi matchup so many times, I know exactly what to do. And even if I lose the game, it isn't because I was confused or I wasn't sure what was happening or I wasn't sure what I needed to block. It's because maybe things didn't go my way. But I know exactly what needs to happen for me to win. And on the other side of that, Lexi doesn't. She knows generally how to win an aggro mirror. She knows generally what Phi does. But she doesn't know what is in the deck. She doesn't know which card she needs to be on the lookout for. She doesn't know what my turn cycles look like to know, well, based on this being the 3rd chain link and you having 2 cards and 1 resource available, you can definitely present another Mask of Momentum trigger based on you having Kodachi, Ravenous Rabble with 1 resource floating and 1 card in hand. I need to expect Breaking Point. This is all to our advantage, and this is something that we can look forward to by continuing to play this Tier 2 hero throughout the rest of the ProQuest season. We pick up our win in top 8. We move on to top 4, which, we catch a lucky break, is against Dromai. Because we are the lower seed going into this matchup, we are told that we are going first, which is great news for us. And another instance I found out afterwards of our opponent just not being familiar with the Phi matchup. This Dromai player does not have a lot of local Phi players, even local Ninja players for that matter. So he doesn't know that we want to go first, because then Dromai does not get to easily make Ash. He doesn't know that Phi really wants to set up that 5-card hand so that we can still present damage while killing dragons while triggering Mask of Momentum. He was playing Crown of Dominion, he was playing Tomes, but he didn't know that the gold token ensures that he can craft a good hand and good turn on turn 1, just in case he draws too many reds. He doesn't know that once Phi takes the lead in that game, it's really hard for Dromai to pull it back, because the best card in her deck doesn't block and her headpiece doesn't block. So while this ended up being more or less a typical Phi game versus Dromai, it didn't need to be. And this is an advantage of playing just one hero. Now we did get some very lucky breaks, and I don't want to take anything away from this Dromai. He is a very skilled player. He is semi-local in the NorCal area, if not my specific city. He played 3 Yenderais over the course of the game, and to each Yenderai, we were able to throw a double strike somewhere in the turn so that Tiger Stripe Shuko would trigger. The double strike would pierce through Yenderai's shield without any damage being prevented, and we were able to kill the Yenderai while also triggering Mask of Momentum. Overall, we were just very far ahead in this game at the end of it, and Dromai conceded with us at 20 life, just packing it in, shaking it off as a lost cause, which I can absolutely appreciate. The day was getting on, moving towards night. This player and his carpool had to get back to further up north, so I can absolutely understand packing it in, choosing to leave the venue early and maybe getting home at a reasonable hour of the night. Finally, we move into the finals. We are up against our same Icelander that we had lost to previously, but rather than play out the game, he and I decide to split. So the way this breaks down is all other prize support from the store aside, I concede the game so that my buddy gets the PTI. The PTI must go to the winner. It cannot be gifted or sold. So I need to concede. He needs to win to get the PTI. And in exchange, I get the gold foil black envelope. Some people, my girlfriend, my parents, once they were all told, and I'm sure some of you would take issue with this decision to concede and take the black envelope. But Lupine, you say, what about competitive integrity? What about glory and prestige? What do I always tell you? The goal of this channel is to optimize and tighten our gameplay in the future for competitive integrity, for glory and prestige. No, it's to walk away with that shiny, shiny cardboard, which is exactly what I did. As a third benefit, Icelander got 4 living legend points and Phi didn't. You're welcome. I will be in Pro Tour Los Angeles for open entry events, including the calling. Overall, this was an incredible event. I love playing at these higher levels of competition. I love fighting for ELO. I love fighting for cold foil heroes and for gold foil envelopes. And in particular, it is very validating to me to watch my progress from the last RTN season, where I felt lucky to even top 8, to top 32 at calling, to now be reaching the finalist position of a ProQuest, all from starting making these stupid little videos. It is actually doing the thing that I set out to do, and that makes me feel great. I hope that you are all getting something out of this as well. I hope this sort of video appeals to you. You can let me know in the comments down below if this is the sort of thing you would like to hear more of after I go to bigger events. If there is some sort of other tournament report-esque component of a video that you were looking for, or if you just want to see more Daily Phi gameplay. In any case, I will be giving you more gameplay analysis over the rest of this week, and again into the future. I will be attending Game Castle Fremont this coming Sunday to play in that ProQuest as well. I'll be giving you another tournament report next week, but for now, you can look forward to more Daily Phi gameplay in your feed, and until then, I hope you all take care and have a nice rest of your day. Bye.